Okay, so now we're into unit 4 and we're doing abnormal psychology. A couple ways you might be able to do your notes. You can see on the screen here. You might just take out a piece of paper, write the title of the what we're talking about, which right now is going to be addiction. And then on the left-hand side, you're going to write like a question or the keyword. And on the right-hand side, you'll just kind of take the notes that I have here. Or if you want, you can use index cards and write addiction and then the definition on the back. I believe there's 3 cards, so it's not a lot, but we're going to go through here and just talk about addiction as part of our beginning of our abnormal psyche unit. All right, so here we go. So on the left-hand side of the sheet of paper, just write the word addiction and then make a line down and about a third in. This is called a Cornell note. And on the right, we're going to define it. If you want, this would go on front of your index card. And on the back side, you would write what we're going to put. And I noticed I numbered it. This is card number 1. So it's easy to study. All right. So first off, addiction is compulsive substance seeking behavior. Like compulsive as in like you just can't control it. Like you need it. That's the compulsion aspect of this. So compulsive substance seeking behavior. At any time, pause, of course, if you need to while you're writing. And then another aspect of addiction is that you have a growing tolerance to drugs or alcohol. So like you have at first a little bit of the drug or a little bit of alcohol is good enough, but then eventually 1 or 2 beers turns into 6, turns into 8. A little bit of pot turns into a lot. You need more and more and more. And then lastly, and this is really critical definition of addiction, which is that you have withdrawal symptoms when you stop using it. So you stop using, and now all of a sudden, like you start having symptoms, you start feeling really horrible from it, actually. Approximately 22.7 million people in America are addicted to drugs and alcohol. So that's the statistic part of this. 22.7 million people are addicted to drugs and alcohol. If you need more time, go ahead and pause. All right, risk factors. So, like, why do some people end up addicted to alcohol and drugs? And that's what we're going to look at next. And so, go ahead and put this on the front side. If you're using just a regular sheet of paper on the left, go ahead and just write addiction or put risk factors on the left-hand side. Remember, at the end of this, I just want you to take a photograph, put all your cards together and photograph them and upload them, or just take your notes, take one image shot of it, and upload that into Google Classroom. Or I mean, if you're using a Google document, I hadn't said that, but if you're using a Google Doc, you can just type it in and then go ahead and do that as well. All right. So genetics is about 50% of the risk. Genetics is about 50% of the risk. So if you have family members who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, then you're much more likely to actually become an alcoholic or become addicted. So you have to be really careful if you have alcoholism that runs in your family. I do. So that's something that I got to be really careful of because I am much more likely to become an addict or an alcoholic as a result of that. Childhood trauma is huge. 2/3 of people that are treated for drug abuse reported being abused or neglected as a child. So you could see that, like, when we've talked about this in psychology, things that happen to you when you're young have impact when you're old. It's not determinative. It's not going to like, it has to be this way. You still have a role to play, a choice to play in all of this. But the reality is that how we behave as parents and what we do with our children has an impact on how those kids grow up. I mean, this just makes total sense, right? So, but at the same time, if you are someone who grew up in a family that had alcohol or drug abuse or had some issues like that, doesn't mean you will, because you still make choices. You still make a choice on your life. Ease of access is huge. Obviously, the more you're around it, then the more likely that you're going to do it. So, if you have friends who try things, the likelihood you'll try it. You see, if you have a friend who has cigarettes, then you're 56% more likely to, do that as well. So, if you can get access to things, then you're more likely to actually use it. Makes sense. And then this goes right along with it, but like your peer attitudes, like if your friends think it's cool to smoke pot, and then you're going to too, like that's much more likely. So that choosing your friends and who you're around, that's going to be a big impact on whether you use. So these are all the risk factors. You need to know them. All right. And lastly, we have the most, or not, maybe not last, we got two things. Most addictive substances. So on the left-hand side of the sheet, write that, most addictive substances. And then we're also going to have most addictive behaviors. So substances and behaviors. All of these things you probably heard of. This isn't going to be a shock. Number 5, nicotine. All right. Nicotine is the 5th most addictive substance. Nicotine addiction, by the way, is linked to higher rates of alcohol and other drug abuse. So smoking, starting with smoking, ends up leading to other things, or at least that's the theory behind it. 4, barbiturates, which are called downers. If you're not familiar with barbiturates, they were a common drug used as like a sleeping aid, and so the idea is that you take it and you just kind of feel chilled out. They're not as they're not as likely to be prescribed now as they were, say, back in the 1950s. 3, cocaine, heavily addictive. Matter of fact, cocaine, there are people who die on the first usage of it. Very, very addictive drug. Alcohol, of course. You see on the left-hand side, there's a little caption, alcoholism runs in your family. You're 4 times greater risk for addiction. 4 times greater risk for addiction. And lastly, heroin. And this has been all through the news, but that's huge. Heroin just ruins people's lives and has been all over the place. Matter of fact, I'll have a video down below that you can watch about heroin in the Roanoke area. Really horrifying story, but also very relevant to our region. So check that out. It's a short video, but it was done recently. National story had to do with Roanoke. All right, left-hand side, most addictive behaviors. And these are all things that probably don't shock you. But on the left-hand side, write most addictive behaviors, or on the front of your card, write most addictive behaviors. And then remember, if you need to pause it, always pause. Okay, so binge eating is a real problem. This affects more likely to be about 2/3 women and about 1/3 men. But binge eating is definitely and affects both sexes for sure, and that is addictive. And of course, binge eating means like you around people you don't eat much, but then maybe by yourself you like really eat, and then you maybe even make yourself throw up after you eat it. So I mean, this is just like I'm going to eat by myself, and I'm almost embarrassed by eating, and then that leads to overeating. Of course, not healthy at all. Video games, this affects males much more likely than females. And it's a growing addiction, and where you're just spending all your time playing video games. I have a video down below about Dr. Phil and a teenage boy who has who has video game addiction. You'll really enjoy that if you watch it. So make sure you check that out. Shopping, and I have another video for this, a woman who's addicted to shopping, and just how when she goes shopping, she can't help herself. She just has to buy like 40 things. She can't just buy one. She has to get a whole set. If there's one blue shirt, she has to buy a blue one, a red one, a yellow one. I mean, it's off the wall. This is much more likely to affect women. Internet addiction, very equal addiction here. Addiction, by the way, is considered you spend 11 or more hours a day on the internet. I mean, that's a lot of hours. Of course, right now, while we're stuck inside during a quarantine, all of us might be at this point right now doing this. But this is just, again, normal times. And the facts are the average American in 2010 spent an average of 35 hours per week. That's basically a full-time job. And 40 hours a week is a full-time job. So like that's a lot of hours on the internet. 61% say they feel addicted to it. And then lastly, gambling. They've done studies on the brain that gambling has almost the exact same effect in terms of high as drugs, especially like the moments prior to knowing whether you're going to win. It's not even the winning itself. It's like the moments right before it where like the brain really gets going. You're like, and you're so excited about the potential for winning. And that's why people just keep pulling that slot lever, because each time they pull it, they get that little surge of adrenaline, almost like a drug. All right, awesome. You're going to need to study these, and you're going to do the millionaire that I have as practice for this. So go ahead and take a moment and just kind of review these. Again, I don't think any of these things are shocking to you. They're probably somewhat review, but you definitely need to review them and do the practices. All right, thanks.